Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if you're new. And without wasting any time, let's get to the video.
Imagine a punishment so gruesome that, in an era of cruel executions, it still stood out as extraordinarily horrific. Well, that's exactly what execution by sawing in half was. In today's video, we will explore how this was carried out, where and when it was used, and why it eventually disappeared from the world's penal practices. Death by sawing is, as implied, literally cutting a living person in half. Executioners could carry out one of three variations. The first being where the condemned was suspended upside down so that the blood rushed to the head and would keep them conscious for longer. Then they would place a large saw at the victim's crotch and saw downwards through the body. This process was often done slowly to maximize pain, essentially torturing the victim as they died.
I wonder who came up with this, because you can't be okay in the head, and try something like this. And who are the people, the exact people who are doing this? Because I don't think I would have the stomach to do something like this.
There are even accounts that some victims remained conscious until the saw reached the mid-torso region. The condemned could feel, quite literally, themselves being cut in half as the saw made its way through their body, well before they lost consciousness. This unspeakable method was deliberately designed to be slow and agonizing, making it one of the most brutal punishments ever conceived. The second variation was considered marginally more merciful by executioners. In this method, the saw was placed above the victim's head, and the cut was carried downward through the skull and torso. Death would typically occur more quickly than in the other form, as severe trauma to the head often led to a rapid loss of consciousness. But even so, the act remained extraordinarily violent. The positioning was not intended to spare the victim from suffering entirely, but rather to shorten the duration of awareness. And finally, the third method, involving placing a saw or blade directly at the waist or midsection and cutting the body in half horizontally. This approach was usually faster than vertical sawing, as it severed vital organs and major blood vessels more quickly. However, it was still deeply traumatic and terrifying. This method emphasized finality rather than prolonged suffering, but it retained its symbolic brutality. The act of dividing the body at the center carried a powerful message of domination and punishment, reinforcing the authority of those who carried out the execution.
I hope he mentions where these things were happening, because I really want to know what kind of people are doing this and what was going on in their heads. But of all the three he's mentioned so far, the one where your cut starting from your head, going downwards, at least that one, you die quickly. But yeah, if I was any of these people, and I knew something like this was going to happen to me, honestly, I'd just kill myself, because yeah, I don't think I'd ever want to go through something like this, ever.
In many instances, this would be done in front of an eager audience. You might think that such brutal executions would be something that many would not wish to see, but they were so violent as to deter anyone else from committing the serious crimes for which such executions were reserved, such as treason or attempting to kill a monarch. In all three variations, the purpose extended beyond killing alone. The method was designed to prolong anticipation, forcing the condemned to confront the act before it even began. The visible presence of the saw, the deliberate pacing, and the public setting created immense psychological terror long before the death itself, making the execution as much an exercise in fear and intimidation as in punishment. One of the earliest references to execution by sawing comes from the ancient Persian world in the 5th century BC. This account comes from Ctesias. Ctesias was a Greek physician who served at the court of the Persian king Artaxerxes II. He described how the Persian royal court sometimes used extreme and highly public forms of punishment against enemies and rivals. According to his account, these punishments included execution by sawing. The depraved Roman Emperor Caligula also reportedly used this practice with enthusiasm. Some sources claim that during Caligula's reign, numerous condemned people, including members of his own family, were sawn in half across the torso.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Caligula the same guy who had some young man pretend or force the young man to be like his woman for like I don't know how many years. Maybe I'm wrong, and it's another Greek emperor, but I hear he was the worst, like the worst monarch in history, and he did a lot of horrible things. So hearing that he was a fan of this very specific torture is not surprising.
Caligula is even said to have watched these executions whilst eating food, claiming that witnessing these horrors made him hungry, although this could have been a little bit of propaganda against him. Execution by sawing cropped up in many parts of the world over the centuries: Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. One notorious case occurred in Morocco in 1705 under Sultan Moulay Ismail. A rebel governor named Alkaid Malik was sentenced to death by sawing after leading a revolt. Accounts describe how the Sultan sought advice from his favourite carpenter about which of his saws would be best to cut a man in half with. The Sultan ordered that it be done lengthwise from head to toe. Melik was tied to a board, ready to be sawed alive. But when the day came, it was decided that the executioners should begin at his groin. It's said that he remained conscious until nearly the end. In medieval Europe, death by sawing was not a common official penalty, but there are a few references to its use in extreme cases. For example, during the Spanish Inquisition, there is one report from the Morisco Revolt in Granada, in which a captured Muslim rebel was sawn apart alive by Spanish authorities in 1569. This was considered, even during an exceptionally bloody conflict, to be incredibly cruel.
I feel like one thing humanity is really good at is hurting other people, hurting other humans, because it's like if you've ever looked into the kinds of torture that were around back then, you'd see that a lot of them were very inventive. So someone had to sit down and really think about how to, really make someone suffer. I don't know if I was back then at the time. I don't think I'd survive. Many of us wouldn't either, even if it wasn't common. Those were some crazy times.
Methods akin to sawing were also used in Asia. Ancient China had an execution known as the waist chop, essentially cutting a person in two at the waist. This dates back to the Zhou dynasty and was one of the harshest penalties in imperial China. The waist chop typically involved a single powerful cut with a blade to sever the body at the midsection, but sometimes it took multiple cuts to fully divide the victim. The Chinese even developed a technique for vertical sawing in at least some cases. The condemned would be secured upright between two boards fixed at stakes, and two executioners would pull a saw back and forth to slice down through the boards and the enclosed victim. Several Chinese historical figures were executed by being cut in half. One often cited figure is Guo Qi, a prominent poet who was executed in 1379. Gao Qi fell victim to the early Ming dynasty's harsh political purges, which targeted scholars and officials suspected of dissident or insufficient loyalty. Another particularly grim example is that of Yu Hongtu. According to the legend, in 1734, Yu was sentenced to waist cutting. So the story goes, he remained conscious briefly after the blow, and before dying, he used his own blood to write the word cruel on the ground. It's said that when the news of this execution reached the emperor, he was so appalled by the brutality that he ordered waist cutting to be abolished entirely. Elsewhere in Asia, one of the most famous accounts of execution by sawing occurred in India. In 1765, the 9th Sikh guru Tegh Bahadur was arrested in Delhi following the reign of one of the Mughal emperors. The guru had openly opposed policies that pressured non-Muslims to convert, bringing him into direct conflict with imperial authority. He was imprisoned alongside several close companions, and one of them was Bhai Mati Das, a devout Sikh. Sikh sources state that Bhai Mati Das was offered clemency if he renounced his faith and joined Islam, but he refused. According to Sikh writings, he was then executed in a public display meant to intimidate others.
That's impressive, to know something like that would happen to you and still, stand on your beliefs. Honestly, I don't think that's something I could ever do. It just shows how impeccable this person was, when it came to things he would never do.
He was bound upright between two wooden planks and then sawn in half. However, it's said that he remained totally composed throughout the entire execution and recited scripture until the brutal end. He is remembered in Sikh history for his acts of religious sacrifice and resistance. The day of his death is celebrated as a public holiday in some parts of India. Some of the last alleged Tsar executions occurred during the Hungarian Revolution of 1848, although they do appear in partisan accusations rather than verified legal records. By this point, sawing had ceased to exist as a lawful punishment and survived only as an accusation of vigilante brutality in moments of chaos. After the mid-19th century, no recognized state continued to employ sawing in half as an execution method. As legal systems reformed, most governments sought more humane or at least quicker methods of execution. Public sensibilities were shifting, and prolonged torture killings came to be seen as barbaric and unacceptable. But it's terrifying to think that for some people, being sawn in half was their very last moments on this earth.
I never thought that I'd ever watch, a video about, people getting sawed in half, but here we are. But thankfully, things like this don't happen anymore, and I hope that whatever the people who did these things to, other people, are suffering wherever they are. But yeah, that was a pretty strange and interesting video that I'll leave the link for in the description, so you can go check it out if you want. And this guy makes pretty interesting videos, so go check him out. And I thank you all for watching, and see you guys in the next video.
Okay.